Well, I'm here.
I'm just waiting for the live to go on. Is it on?
It,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm sorry, guys. I was looking on the wrong spot. Today's Sunday, August 11th, 2024. Today's story is Mucksters Story. And here's Muckster. And we're just going to be presenting a video at first. And then if Muckster needs to add some more to his story, he will add on to it.
yeah. Let me explain that first. We're doing something that I don't think I'd let anybody else get away with. Uh, I have actually three short anecdotes that I've actually done videos on before, but it was a long time ago when I first started on YouTube, and people won't have seen them. And when I went to look at one, I was horrified at the way the video looked. And I thought, oh, I need to reissue this. But I thought if I retold the story, it would come off like I was reading a script. So anyway, I'm going to play. There's three videos. Ariel said he wants to show all three before we do any kind of questions and comments.
Right.
You'll see I just put a little spacer in between them just to show when I think it should be obvious when one ends and the other starts. But anyway, I'll play them. The first two are going to be audio only, but I'm on screen, pretend my lips are moving. The third one is the video. The first two are more anecdotes about the family, give you a little idea of what my family is like. The third one is more personal. Anyway, here it goes. Let me. Him, known to most of the world as Jim E, which is weird because his middle initial was D. So why did they call him Jimmy? But he was playing junior high football. And back in those days, Ponce de Leon had not discovered middle school yet, so we had junior high. Well, one night playing junior high football, he broke his leg pretty badly. I mean, do you ever break your leg good? And for some reason, had never anticipated that one of their students could break their leg playing football. So they had to carry my brother off the field. And the only thing they had to carry him with, they looked around and they found an old 2x6, I guess it was. And they carried him off the field on board. Imagine this. This kid just broke his leg in three places. I don't know. He broke it. I know that. But anyway, here's this kid with a broken leg in pain, and they're carrying him off on a board. Now, the thing about this that I always think of is major lawsuit, right? That's what you'd think today. You know somebody would be suing the school. But my parents didn't think like that. I think most people back then didn't. Instead, what my father did was he went out and got the school a stretcher so this would never happen to another kid. Just a whole different way of looking at things. Just a couple family photos. Okay, folks, here it is. The first of my promised reminiscences, which is a good word, reminiscence. Look it up. Uh, this story isn't actually going to be about me. It's about my mother. It's my famous favorite story about my mother. Some people who bother to watch this might have heard it because I've told it before. In fact, I first told it at her funeral. And first, though, for those of you who didn't know her, and for that I'm sorry, but I have to give you some background so you can truly appreciate My mother, born in 1923 in central Pennsylvania coal mining area, coal mining country, that's what I wanted to say. So, not the most sophisticated area to grow up in, especially for someone who was the daughter of an immigrant coal miner married to a first generation American. My mother's father barely spoke English, from what I've heard. I've never met any of my grandparents. And my mother was one of 14 kids. And when my mother graduated the 8th grade, they made her quit school so she could start earning money to help with the family. And apparently she begged her father to let her go to school. She loved to learn, but nope, she had to get out there. In fact, if I have it right, of the 14 kids, the first one to graduate from high school was the third youngest. And the only reason she ended up finishing school all the way is because at the time my mother was up in Connecticut and she had her sister come up there to finish school. The youngest two, I believe, just finished school here when Osceola had their own high school. Anyway, back to Mom. Born in 23 to this immigrant coal mining family, conservative Catholics. And the point I'm trying to make is you wouldn't necessarily consider them to be very sophisticated people. So let's come forward about 70 to 80 years. And at the time, my mother and I both lived here in this apartment that I'm in now. And one night, I'm sitting here, the phone rings, and I thought to myself, hey, the phone rings, phone is ringing, maybe I should answer it. So I did. And the person on the other end of the line was my nephew, Andrew, calling from California. And we talked for a little bit about nothingness. And then he got to the point. He said, Uncle Dan, I want to tell you something. He said, and so far, besides my mom, you're the first one I'm telling. Okay. He said, I'm gay. And I said, no, you're not. He said, what do you mean? I said, Andrew, I've known you all your life. You're not that good looking, and you're a lousy dresser. No way you're gay. So then we talked a bit about his gayness, and I don't know how he was going to have to learn more about show tunes and flower arranging and stuff. But after a bit, then he said, I just don't understand. I don't know how to tell Grammy. Now, I may not be the smartest man in the world, despite what you all think. But I didn't just fall off the Uncle Truck the other day. I knew what that meant. That meant, hey, could you tell Grammy for me? So I said I'd take care of it. The next morning, when I was getting ready to head off to my laborious job at the library, I was out in the kitchen. I said to my mother, I said, so you know Andrew called last night? She said, oh yeah, really? What's going on with him? And and I'm trying to think, how am I going to explain this to her? I said, well, his roommate, Paul, he's not really just his roommate. And she said, so what, did he decide to become gay? And I laughed inside a little bit and very well, not the way I would put it, but yeah, I guess so. And so I said to her, yeah, and she said, I figured. And that was the end of the conversation. Didn't come up again. And a while later, Andy and Paul came to visit. And when they got here, my mother treated her grandson the way she always did. And she treated Paul like anybody else that walked into her house. She assigned him chores to do. And the two of them sat and talked about The Young and the Restless and what Victor was up to now and all that stuff. And it was just no big deal. And so the whole point of this story, the reason I like to tell it is, and I have to give my mother's background in this and her age and all that for people to appreciate it, because I always think to myself, especially when I'm thinking about people my age or younger, that coming from where she did, could just accept people for who they were, no matter who they slept with, what color their skin was, how much money they made, none of that. Then, as far as these other people who have a problem with these things, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know? So, that's pretty much the point of the story. And I will tell you there's a associated story that I'll tell. I won't add it onto this because I don't want to make these too long. But it's about her younger brother, Uncle Joe, which is a weird name to give to a kid, but he grew into it. And I'll save that one for another time. But it also, I always think of that story and this one to show how similar my mother and Uncle Joe looked at life. By the way, thanks people for coming. There it is. So it was near the end of my 8th grade year. It was a school day. And I woke up and I knew somehow, because I don't think I had a clock in my room, but I knew it was late. I knew my mother hadn't woken me up for school. And I was laying upstairs in bed and the house was quiet. And I just kept thinking, I don't want to make a noise. Because if my mother hears me moving around, she's going to realize she never sent me off to school and it's going to ruin things. I was afraid that was going to ruin my day. But eventually, I had to piss. So I got up and walked down the hall and went in the bathroom. And when I came out of the bathroom, my father was standing at the top of the steps. Now you might think that's not odd, except at the time my father worked away. He was a office manager for a construction company. And for many years, he was only home on weekends because the jobs were too far away. So the first thing I saw him and I was confused, what's he doing home? And he just looked at me and he said, your brother is dead. And it's like my very first urge, which only lasted half a second, luckily, was to laugh. I thought this is some sort of a weird joke, you know? And then, I was thinking, because I had two brothers, you know, if you've been keeping track of these videos, you'll have seen my brother Rick. And then I had a brother older than Rick, whose name was Jim. And also I had the oldest in the family was Lila, the sister, and the youngest is Barb, the other sister. But anyway, he said, your brother. And for some reason, right off, I thought, well, Rick can't be dead. I just saw him not long ago. I just saw him last night. And this all went through my head in about, 2 seconds. You know how that happens. And then he said, and his throat was all choked up. This is over 50 years ago, and I'm getting choked up. He said, Jimmy is dead. And then I think he went back downstairs, and I went to my room to get dressed, and I just had no idea what the hell was going on. This just made no sense to me. This would be the first person in my family, first person close to me at all that had died in my life. All my grandparents were dead before I was born. I think my one grandmother was still alive, but I never met her. And there was never anybody else like that even like any friends or anything like that. So that just had my mind twisting. And I got downstairs, and somewhere along the way, over the next days or whatever, hours, minutes, whatever, I learned that Jimmy had gone to a senior party the night before, and he'd taken his car. He'd got a Triumph, a little sports car. I think it was a TR3. It was a little convertible. It was a cool car. Anyway, it was a two-seater. And after the party, and I don't know how much booze any of them had had, but he was giving two of his classmates a ride home. And they wrecked down by, anybody from around here, Midway Curve, down by right there where that gas company is, and before you get to Dunlap's, down there. Anyway, they had wrecked. I think one guy got a broken leg. Another guy, I don't know what kind of injuries he had, but Jim died. And it was a rough couple of days. One of the first things I remember, and one of the things too I remember about that is I was confused. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel, how I was supposed to act. If anybody happens to watch this who's younger and hasn't had this experience, let me just tell you, you feel what you feel, act how you act, say what you say. Everybody's different. There's no supposed to involved. Anyway, but I remember one of the things, I don't know if it might have been later that day. I think I was out in the kitchen or something, and I heard my mother in the living room just scream. Now you have to know, both my parents were strong people. They were of that greatest generation that grew up in the Depression. They were both hardworking people that things didn't faze them. And my mother just gave this screech. And I just heard her saying, like, no, no, no. And I don't know if I went there or my father came out to where I was after a bit, and he told me to go over town, that Dr. Gillard had called a prescription in for my mother, and I went over to Fox's drugstore to pick it up. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing, Valium or something along those lines. But I could have never imagined seeing my mother hysterical like that. And so then, there was those couple of days, and I can remember other weird thoughts. Like I can remember sitting in the living room and hearing kids walking by on the sidewalk outside, laughing or whatever. And I felt like jumping up and going over and going, "What are you doing? Don't you know this is the death house?" I don't know, just any kind of weird thoughts like that. And so the arrangements were made at Heath's. And I remember, they had a private viewing for the family before they had, any of the public stuff. And I wasn't wild about going, but it was, you had to. I remember one of the things about that also kept going through my mind was just that I didn't believe it was real. And, the thing is, at the time, like I said, I was all confused and I wasn't sure, what I was supposed to feel or anything. So I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't know what was normal. But I just kept remember thinking it's not real. It's not it's some kind of joke. Yeah, just like all kind of crazy thoughts. Like, oh, he went off to join the CIA or something. I don't know. Anyway, went over to that viewing. And this is something that was really weird for me. When I walked in and saw him laying in the casket, all of a sudden I thought to myself, it's real. I didn't believe it until now. And at the same time, I heard my father say, I never believed it until now. And my mother said to him something like, I knew you wouldn't. I knew you wouldn't. But I don't know how long, like I stood there or whatever. And I maybe went down on the kneeler and said a prayer. I know that's something you generally do. I don't remember if I did or not. Now that I think of it, I kind of have this memory. And I don't know if it's real or not, but I think I actually was on the kneeler next to my sister Lila. And we were praying together. I just thought of another memory I'll get to about Lila after a bit. But so then I was there and I had to escape. I had to go. And I said something like, I'm going. And my dad grabbed my hand and says, don't go. And he had tears in his eyes and stuff. Again, something I never would have thought I'd see. And I wanted to go home. And my mother said, so it's okay. It's okay. He's just going outside for a bit. So that's what I did. I remember going out. And my one cousin came out. He was an older cousin. And he came out and stood with me for a while and that. And I know that's something I'll always be thankful for, just having them there. See, like I said, 50 years later, I still have trouble. Anyway, I remember when we had the public viewing, and of course, it was like the whole high school showed up. And Jim was one of those guys. He was easygoing and popular, He made friends easy and all that. And of course, you know how that goes too, and something like that, especially with in a small town and high school. Even if you don't know the person that well, it affects everybody. Um, and I and I can remember being at the viewing. I remember there being a couple of kids from my grade coming in, and like my mother said, go over and say hello to them and that, you know, like because really they were coming for me, you know. I mean, I didn't totally understand all these protocols and stuff at the time, but that was kind of nice of them. Anyway, of course, there was the funeral, which the church was packed. But the other thing I was going to say about with Lila, I'd forgotten, but I remember just now talking about it. Now, the Catholic Church, which if you saw my tour video, we zipped by it a little fast, but it has the big front doors, but there's also a side door with a ramp going up to it. And we were walking up that ramp. And it was really weird because I was walking next to Lila. And I just felt like I needed to hold somebody's hand. And all of a sudden I felt her hand in mine. It was like a, you know, just like sort of like a psychic thing. And we walked up that ramp. And then when we were getting towards the doors, I thought, and of course this is silly, I was afraid I'd go in and kids my age, I thought it'd be embarrassing. They see me holding my sister's hand. You know, stupid things you think of at that age. But as we were getting to the door, she let go of my hand. I always remember it was such a weird thing that it's like she sensed I needed to hold her hand and she sensed I needed to let it go. For all I know, maybe she needed to hold my hand. You know what I mean? And so, of course, we had the funeral and the burial and then a bunch of people at the house. Back then, those things were almost always held at the house. Now, a lot of people, at least around here, it'll be like the church basements and that, where they'll have the after funeral thing with the food and all that. But had all that people at the house and people bringing, you know, casseroles and all that. And that was still one of the worst times of my life. And I wish I never would have had to see that happen to my parents. So again, if any youngsters are watching, don't do that to your parents. I mean, you've heard it plenty of times, don't drink and drive. Don't drink stupid, you know? I mean, don't drive stupid. You know, don't, any of that stuff here, don't text and drive, whatever. Don't be in the car goofing around with your friends, which I used to do all the time. Luckily, I didn't put my parents through it a second time. But yeah, that I guess that's mostly all I can think of to say about that. I'm sure, like always, there'll be other things I think of later, but I think this will probably be the most serious video you'll ever see out of me. Peace out.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to talk about, Muckster? I don't know if you want to talk about the job you had, or how many years you worked there, or
Well, there's not a whole lot to say. I worked about 30 years at the library. There was one addendum story I did. I'll just say it real quick. It's something I thought of afterwards with my brother. There was a convenience store I used to hang out in a couple years ago, And the guy who was like the district manager went to school with my brother. And it's funny because this was like probably 30 years, 40 years afterwards, whatever. And he said to me, he goes, "Oh, by the way, I was good friends with, and I don't know, Joe Blow. I don't remember the names." And I was like, "Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, he's in the car with your brother." And I think he thought that was like he was making a connection with me. And it surprised me, and I'm sure he saw it in my eyes. But all those years later, I felt hate. Because in my mind, those two guys killed my brother, you know? Anyway. Yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can look at them and we'll go from there.
I was thinking um I might see if my sister wants to do her version of those events. She was a lot younger.
And what? How old was you, and what year was that, Mockster?
Well, like I said, it was the 8th grade.
So about
So I was probably like 13.
13, whatever. Yeah, okay.
Actually,
How much older was your brother than you?
he was 19 at the time.
Okay, so he was already out of school then, or
No,
getting
that was his senior year.
Okay, okay.
Both my brothers. I think it's like when we moved from Connecticut, they were held back a year.
Yeah, same thing with me. I also graduated at 19. I just turned 19 just before I graduated. Yeah.
But Nikki wants to know how I started at the library. Actually, when I moved back from Pittsburgh, and I wasn't working at the time, and I was hanging out there just hanging out there, and then I started volunteering, and then one lady quit, and they said, "Hey, do you want the job?" And I said, "Okay." And then after a little bit, I became the manager of the place.
What did you learn at the library?
Uh, People are idiots, but I think I kind of knew that already.
Okay.
Well, here we'll address biscuits first, and then I can tell you a story about the kind of people that going to a funeral 26-year-old boy that had hooks in them. I don't know. I don't know what he means by had hooks in them.
That comment was highlighted because he is saying if you're hurting, reach out, there is help out there.
Yeah, definitely talk to people. I was young and stupid, but I'm still not good at talking to people. I'll tell you a quick library story. I got a phone call one time, and I've had this kind of phone call several times. Okay, got a phone call one time, and the person said they were obviously doing family research, but they first asked, "Do we have back issues of newspapers?" And I said, "Yeah, we keep the local paper back a month or so." And they said, "No, I mean old ones." And I said, "Well, we do have the old Osceola paper from, and it was like from 1890 to 1930 or something like that." I said, "We have it, every issue of it on microfiche." And they said, "Well, do you have back issues of this other paper?" And I said, "We have the Osceola paper from 1890 to 1930. Do you have 1950s?" Now, you know me, I stay calm. So by then I'm like, "We have the Osceola paper from 1890 to 1930. And that just, yeah, I get those kind of questions a lot of times. People like, you know.
Yeah. So they don't have 1950.
No,
Okay. Just checking. Um. Any other questions? Because I have a couple questions myself.
yeah, go for it.
Um. What was like the most popular book when you was working there that was either read there or taken out or books? Certain
Well,
type of books, or what do you?
Biggie's was Danielle Steele. A lot of women read Danielle Steele. That's one of those ones. Anytime she was coming out with a book, we'd have a waiting list for it. Of course, when the Harry Potters came out, we got
Okay.
several copies of them, and they were always on waiting list. And a lot of people like the true crime stuff. Mysteries and that are always good. Personally, worked out good for me. I was the person ordering books, and I was always a science fiction fantasy fan. And it's actually interesting. We had a pretty good selection of that because not only me, but the lady who was the manager when I first started, her son read those books. Another lady that was the same age as me that started working there read those books. So we got them a lot, and
Did
we
you?
used to get requests from like Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh for one of our books. Imagine that,
Wow. Yeah.
our little old library having to lend books out there. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool that you can do that with other libraries. Um. So going back to the little Harry Potter, there was it mostly kids or both adults and children wanted it? Because I know it's very popular.
Yeah, it went across the line. I certainly read them. I got to read them before we could put them on the shelf. One of the things, like at the library, when you order a book, a lot of times you'll get it a week or two before the release date. With the
Okay.
Harry Potter books, I had to sign a contract saying that it would not be displayed, even not put on the shelf, but not displayed before the release date. But me and Marsha always read them first. Um, I forget what you said. Oh, who read them? Adults read them, but I always thought those books were kind of genius because they really appealed to the people who were in the same age range as Harry Potter in the book. And
Okay.
as the books progressed and he got older and the writing got more sophisticated, and so it's like there's a generation of people, especially girls that I know that, I mean, they're huge Harry Potter fans because it just fit the age they were at the time. But yeah, they were the main readers of that, but it spread across the ages.
It's funny you say that because I worked with a lady who loved Harry Potter, and I knew nothing about Harry Potter, and all she did was talk about that all day long. She was either the Hogwarts or whatever the other. She was like, "This is my team." And she would
Yeah.
just go on and on. And I had no idea what she was talking about till the movies come out. But yeah,
Uh, Hogwarts was the school. She was probably telling you she was a Gryffindor or something like that. That was the
yeah,
groups. Uh, Cart, I used to know. I honestly cannot remember at all how many books we had, whether it was 2,000 or 10,000. But the great thing about it is, and I don't know if this is everywhere, but Pennsylvania had a great interlibrary loan thing. Like I said about how we would send books out. Somebody come in and they'd say, "Do you have this book?" "No, but I can get it for you." And we get it from some other library. So we did not have to have them all there.
right.
Back when I first started too, one of the things that's changed over time is I started kind of pre-internet. So we used to do an awful lot of reference stuff, but especially for school projects and that. And now everybody can do that from home with Google.
Right.
That is a two-part question. But
How many people? Jeez, I can't remember the circulation figures either. I think if I was to average out on any given day, I don't know, maybe 20 to 50 people a day. It wasn't real big. One thing about our library, though, is also because it's small town, it was a place where people would come and just hang out, drink coffee, you know. So it wasn't like all business. One of the big things we, I was just going to say that. Yes, we did. We had a very popular story hour Tuesdays and Thursdays. We did 3 separate ones. The groups were like around 15. It was 3 to 5 year old. You had to be between 3 and 5 and potty trained was the rule for it. And we charged people $1 a session, which did not come anywhere near to paying what the we paid the lady who did them. But yeah, I love story hour was great, introducing kids to books who maybe wouldn't see them. And also, I always thought one of the great things about it was kids would come out at the end to get books, and they had to stand in line. And I think that's sort of like was the kids' first introduction to having to like wait their turn that way. Sort of. We weren't worried about teaching them how their alphabet. I mean, they got some of that, but I think it gave them that little bit of social training that they were going to need when they actually hit the classroom. Lost my big sister car. I mean, back when I was only 11. Yeah. So you kind of understand it.
So
Yeah,
the good,
go ahead.
you had the first dibs then on the books when they first come in.
Yep. Like I said, well,
Yeah, you got a
the
week
good,
ahead of time. So
yeah, and so one of the things about it was me reading it was not depriving somebody else because I read it before it actually was going to hit the shelf anyhow. Well, thank you, Cart. I think I'm beautiful also. Wow. Cart, I just realized what time it is. You stayed up for us. Thank you. Anyway, you got anything else, Ariel?
no, that's pretty much it. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to hang out in the library all the time. I wasn't really reading books, but I was doing other things. But yeah, I used to go to the library all the time.
My whole family was readers. I think pretty much all my nephews and nieces and grandnephews and that are all readers. Even now, the younger ones, they like to go to the library and get real books, not just
Right.
reading it on a Kindle or whatever. I was surprised when I went to college, because I mean, you'd think college, that's going to be everybody's, is going to be sitting around talking about having read, Plato and Sartre and Tolstoy. I met an awful lot of people in college who say, yeah, I only ever read books that I was forced to. Anyway.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
Telling us what was the most impactful memory do you have from your time at the library? Well, like I said, me having to politely deal with idiots. Also, in my time, see, we didn't have a library when I was a kid. The bookmobile came like once a month, which wasn't good for me because I was lousy at returning books. But while I was in Pittsburgh, they opened the library in a storefront. It was downstairs from the dentist office, and he gave them the space at a very good rate. And not long after I started working there, the Legion, who was pretty much defunct, but there were some guys still members, they offered the old Legion building to us. So we moved over there and had a little more space and a nicer building. And that's a whole nother discussion on its own, though, because we made the mistake when we were first organizing it. And we'd have these meetings, and a lot of people would show up to these meetings. And I'll get to that in a second. Cart, that's a good question. A lot of people showed up to these meetings, so there was a lot of people interested in renovating this building for the library. But somebody had the big idea. They said, if we found a historical foundation, then we can apply for grants. Well, they never really did get much grants, but what happened was as soon as it became an historical foundation, actually being the ones leasing to the library, you got two different groups. And they started focusing on their thing. And like I said, that's a whole nother discussion. What did Cart just ask me again? How many books were? See, now that's something that with our library, I never put a limit on people. Um, Whatever you wanted to take out, that was fine. You're responsible for it. I'll tell you one thing I always found interesting with little kids is, the easy reads. We had that section with the Dr. Seuss and Mercer Mayer type books, and the mother would come in with her kid, and she'd say, "Now remember, just 5 books today. I don't have a lot of time to be reading just 5 books." Okay, Mom, the kid would go over, and he'd come over with like 12 books. And the mother would come up and she'd say, "I told you just 5. Well, Mom, but well, no." And the kid would end up leaving with like 7 or 8. They would negotiate. And I always thought to myself, lady, in about 10 years, you're going to be wondering why your daughter is coming in at 12 midnight or 1 o'clock when you told her 10. And it's because you basically taught her everything's negotiable. Anyway, but yeah, we had no limit. We also, if kids wanted to take books out from the adult section, we allowed them. And I'll tell you, there was a kid that came in one time. I think he was just like junior high. And he took out this really thick book about the Boer War. And I was like, "You're sure you want to read this?" "Yeah." Well, he had to renew that book like 3 times to get through it all. And when he brought it back, I wondered, did he really read this? And I asked him some questions. And he's telling me all these stories about how Winston Churchill was a reporter at the time. And for a while, he was held hostage. And that's when I learned, hey, whatever a kid wants to take out, let him take it. And I happen to know that kid right now is a professor of history somewhere in New England.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I like the smell of the library in an old bookstore too, Mitch.
Okay. If anyone else has questions, because we're almost out of time here.
Yeah, I don't want Ariel kicking me out in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, we had, I think we were probably about a 5 limit book where I was at, I think. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I know a lot of libraries will not allow kids to check out books from other sections. It had to be in their age group. But I'll tell you something else I learned about from the library is it doesn't matter what you read as long as you read. There was another girl that came in, and I knew, well, my mother worked for her father actually. But anyway, in the summertime, she'd come in and all she would check out is those Harlequin romances. She was like in high school. Those little pulp books that always had, what was that guy's name? Fabio? Wasn't that the model? He'd always be on the cover of them with no shirt on. But anyway, that's all she would check out all summer. And at the time, I kind of thought, can't you read something else? But I also, people used to always think that my books were silly, so I never said anything. Well, that girl today is I just forgot the name of it, but she's a cancer doctor. What's the word I want?
Oncologist?
Oncologist, yes, she's an oncologist. So that's why I say it doesn't matter what you read as long as you're reading, because that trains your mind, to be able to do that.
I mean, if she's having fun with it, I mean, it's also fantasy at the same time, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I've said several times. I don't like reading like serious books, educational books. I want to relax my mind when I read. First book from Enigma Island, and that was the start of my love of words in written language. I don't know the book, but that's cool.
Okay. A stupid question. Is a comic book considered a book, and do they have them?
Well, a comic book isn't considered a book, but if you call it a graphic novel, all of a sudden it's acceptable.
Okay. I don't know. So
Yeah, I think most people wouldn't. But I mean, we didn't have a comic book section,
I've never seen them. That's why I ask.
but it wouldn't be any different than the fact that we had like magazines and stuff.
Yeah, magazines I've seen, but not comic books. But just ask.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I think back on that, that should have been something that we should have encouraged people. I mean, we maybe wouldn't be buying them, but people could donate them, and we'd have them there for people to trade back and forth.
Yeah. You see, like one of my favorites was Spider-Man because they had what's called the Easy Reader, so that the younger children, they were just easy books for them to follow. They could follow along with the stories.
I know another type of book that was fairly popular. It's not as necessary now because of Kindles and that, but is large print. A lot of times you get a little older, your eyes get a little weaker, but you don't necessarily need the bifocals or whatever, but you just make the print a little larger. Any of the really popular books, I always got a large print copy. Okay.
All right. I think that went well. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to say. We appreciate everyone that came in.
Yep. And next time we're live, feel free, if you think of any other questions, feel free to ask me about them.
Yeah, and remember, guys, if you have a story, no matter what it is that you want to talk about, just get in contact with us and we can share your story.
I don't know if I can name a favorite book, Kellen, but I think one of my favorite authors right off the top of my head is Mercedes Lackey. She writes fantasy. And I first discovered her by her co-writing a book with another one of my favorites, Anne McCaffrey. One of my favorite mystery type guys, and forget it, I just forgot his name. Oh my God. But there's a guy who he'll write mysteries, but you cannot figure him out until the last couple of pages. I always liked him. Geez, I wish I could remember his name. Doing this? Not really. I was surprised.
Wasn't Gillette, right? It wasn't William Gillette.
Wasn't what? William Gillette? No. Originally, I was a little worried about the third story, but after I decided to look at it to edit it, which I didn't do any editing, but I added those pictures that were on there. I realized I could handle watching it again, except I got to tell you today, because when I was editing it, it was sort of, like mechanical. You know what I mean? And today, when I hit that picture of my father holding my hand, it got me a little bit. But yeah, I wasn't really nervous about doing this. So I guess, we've been doing the other stuff so much that wasn't that big a deal. Anyway, like I said, I might see if anyone else from my family would want to talk about that same time, or they might have other stories they want to share. If they do their stories, you'll be learning more about me also.
You have any closing thoughts there before we leave?
Just for the people that came and anybody that watches later, thanks a lot for coming in, and make sure you watch the other video we already did.
Yes,
because her story is 10 times at least more interesting than mine, and she'll be coming back in a couple of weeks for part 2 of it. And watch, subscribe to this channel so that you'll see when anything new is coming up. Thank you for coming, Nikki. Thank you. I'll shut up before you shut me up.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for being here with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.